Well, welcome everyone. I'm Jared White, Bruce Lee's executive assistant. I'm co-hosting the administrative side of the event today. And as we begin, let me just remind everyone to please kindly keep your microphones muted as a courtesy to others. Set your view in the upper right-hand corner of your screen to speaker view, and that's going to allow you to see the speakers in a large screen format. And then also during our question and answer, please type any questions you have into the group chat, and that'll help expedite our Q&A session at the end. Thank you so much for helping me with those items. Our program today is divided into 5 segments: a brief introduction by the president of the Sacramento Taxpayers Association, Bruce Lee; a presentation by Linda Paine, president of the Election Integrity Project; then comments by attorney Joshua Kroot on the 2021 California lawsuit regarding integrity, followed by Congressman Chris Cannon, who served Utah for 40 years, on the importance of this work. And then we'll have a 20-minute Q&A session, followed by concluding remarks by SacTax's Bruce Lee. So with no further delay, here is W. Bruce Lee, president of SacTax.
Thank you very much, Jared. I appreciate that. And friends, we're also very happy to have you here today. We have a wonderful lineup of speakers who have dedicated hundreds, thousands of hours to the issue of election integrity. And I would say that few issues are more important in a democracy today than the sanctity of our vote. And SacTax is committed to the highest level of government transparency and meaningful government oversight. You know, we believe in citizen ownership of our government. And back in March of 2020, since then, we've been involved here at SacTax in a multitude of state and local issues, including split roll property tax, many local policy and tax matters, including COVID fines for businesses in the Sacramento County, changing the election cycle of the county sheriff for political purposes, and the Strong Mayor Initiative. Of particular importance, in the spring of 2020, we met head-on with the Sacramento Transportation Authority's proposal to increase a county-wide sales tax by 0.5% for 40 years. And after months of working with them and battling that issue during the middle of a pandemic, in July, they reluctantly decided to take the measure off the ballot. And most notable was their comment at the very end, the very last comment of their staff report, which said, quote, "Should any organized opposition materialize, the measure will not be viable on the November ballot." Friends, I'm proud to say we were that organized opposition, and we had a resounding success. Now, in this process of working with the Sacramento Transportation Authority, we hope to get the word out to other members of the local governments, county, city, that, you know, we need to be thoughtful what we're doing during the pandemic. But then in August of 2020, the Citrus Heights City Council decided to place Measure M on the November ballot, and they're raising their sales tax by a full 1% with no sunset date at all. It was a forever tax. And the council was confident they would easily win approval, that during this pandemic, their consultants and polling advised they would have a success by over 70% at the ballot box. Now, the council scoffed at us, fully knowing that they're going to be calling in $50,000 of pay-to-play money to push the Measure M across the winning line. And they also knew that they'd be sending out 2 or 3 mass city-paid mailings, quote, educational mailers, for that same purpose. So this was a daunting task, but we rolled up our sleeves, formed the No on M task group, raised about $7,000 from small donors, and coordinated hundreds of volunteer hours from community leaders. And we defeated this ugly pig of a measure by 2,000 votes, or 52%. Again, we were the organized opposition with another wonderful success. Now, in fact, if you look at all of the local tax measures that were put on the November 2020 ballot, they all passed. Every increase, every bond measure, all passed, except where SacTax actively opposed. I say this for only one particular reason. is an important lesson. We did not have to burn down buildings, destroy business. We did not have to deface public monuments. All we had to do was be well organized upfront, use sound logical arguments, make our concerns known, and educate the citizens. We had to put leadership into practice and encourage our citizens to exercise ownership over their government. We had to shed light on important topics to allow our government officials to realize that business as usual was no longer acceptable, and that we all had to be good stewards of the public dollars we had. The lesson learned, the big lesson learned, was that our democratic Republican form of government works when we collectively take responsibility for it. And now there is an ongoing contentious debate that if election integrity is an issue within the United States, are our problems during any election cycle simply abnormalities which occasionally occur, or are there truly systemic issues? So I'm eager to hear from our speakers today to help us discern the realities behind election integrity today in real time. But let me introduce our speakers: Linda Paine, Joshua Kroot, and retired Congressman Chris Cannon. Now, Linda is the co-founder and president of the Election Integrity Project in California. And she and her team have spent over 10 years documenting issues with California's election laws, policies, and procedures. And this has made it possible to file a lawsuit just in the past few months that challenged the constitutionality of some of our state's election laws and procedures. Joshua is an experienced litigator and transactional attorney. He has represented many large businesses and nonprofits throughout the country. In fact, he practiced for over 10 years in the world's largest law firm, where he won important First and 14th Amendment cases. And he is now the founding partner of the Primary Law Group. Congressman Cannon spent 40 years representing the great state of Utah and has gleaned tremendous wisdom through his experience. So we're so pleased to have him here today. So Linda, Joshua, Congressman Cannon, thank you very much for what you have been doing and for taking the time to be here today. And Linda, let me turn it over to you as our initial speaker. Thank you very much.
Okay. All righty. Well, thank you so much for having me. And it is really an honor to be here to share with everyone the work of Election Integrity Project. And I'm going to go ahead and share a PowerPoint with everyone today because there's some information I think will be easier to digest if you can actually see the diagram. So I'll go ahead and do that right now. Okay, so as Bruce said, we are the Election Integrity Project California. And what we're looking at today is the facts that the lack of election integrity actually contributed to the transformation of California. California was, in fact, governed in the form of a republic for a long time. It began to change in 1993 when federal law changed the guidelines for when California could actually remove people from the voter rolls. Before 1993, Californians' policy was that they would remove anyone who didn't vote for 2 consecutive elections. They would just remove them from the voter rolls with the understanding that if they wanted to vote again, they simply register again. The unfortunate reality is once Congress passed the law in 1993 that required them to go through hoops before they could remove anybody, from that point forward, we found through a lawsuit in 2017 that California had not removed anyone from the voter rolls for 20 years. So citizen oversight is critical. There probably would have been no changes in California had citizens united together in the state to form Election Integrity Project. We started as a C corporation and became a non-corporation. But let me tell you a little bit about our work. The C corporation was started in 2010, the nonprofit in 2017. Both are committed to the protection of the election integrity process. It's not so much protecting a candidate or a party. We are a nonpartisan organization because we believe that the cornerstone, of course, of a republic is that we, the people, choose. So if there's a problem in a party, doesn't matter what it is, we decided to look into it. We're excited to say just recently we formed the Election Integrity Project Action. It is our new affiliate. It's a 501c4, and it's going to give us a lot of flexibility in some of the activities that we are most concerned about. And part of that is lobbying against very bad laws. It also will allow less disclosure of donors who would like to contribute to this incredible lawsuit that really must go forward. And we really appreciate you letting us talk about that. The work of EIPCA is probably one of the best kept secrets in the country because while everyone else is now starting to deal with social media suppression, EIP began dealing with that all the way back in 2011. And so you having us at your meeting is so important to help us get the word out. We want to ask the question, did Californians really vote to destroy their own state? And EIPCA says, no, we don't believe that. We don't believe that California did that any more than the states who voted in November decided to vote for a socialist oligarchy. So many things happened in so many states that were shocking. That shock that the country is feeling now is the shock that we in California began to sense all the way back in 2010 and some before. And that's what motivated us to dig in and find out what exactly is happening in California and who are voting for these laws that are destroying our homes and our ability to remove legislators who we think are not doing a good job. Well, Samuel Adams said, no people will tamely surrender their liberties. And that is something that even the state of California, the citizens, in California, have responded to. We are not tamely surrendering our liberties, and we have not for 10 years. All of you know that just from the work you're doing with the Sacramento Tax. Across the state, as I've traveled in 2011, I've met with groups all over the state, from Siskiyou County, the Bay Area, the states, counties along the Nevada state border and down all the way to San Diego. Everywhere I went to talk about the need to find out what exactly is happening in California, all the way back in 2011, I met with groups who stood up almost unanimously and said, count me in. So it is citizens working together to do the work of documenting what's happening. That's what has brought us here now. The 13,000 citizens who stepped up every year to do this have made it possible. Let's look at our research. We began in 2011, looking at policies and procedures, running data, every manner of researching laws at the state federal level. But by 2014, we began to see a pattern, and that's what we looked for beginning in 2011 when we started. We didn't know what we were looking for, so we just figured we'd start digging in, and we'd see wherever there's smoke, there's probably fire, and we looked for patterns. By 2014, the pattern was extremely disturbing. It appeared that California's election process was, in fact, becoming pretty easy to manipulate by those who knew how to exploit the vulnerabilities in the system. And we knew those vulnerabilities existed because we'd been documenting those very vulnerabilities. We were putting together, even beginning in 2012, we put together a findings report. And we provided those findings report to our registrars, to our legislators, and to the Secretary of State, only to find that the next year, our legislators would pass laws making it legal to do the very thing we identified as a vulnerability. Bad laws, weak policies and procedures, and emergency regulations that were implemented in order to increase access to the process. That's what we're hearing nationwide. Implement access to the process. Everyone should vote. EIP began to say, well, not everyone should vote. Citizens should vote. Those who qualify should vote. But this mantra of everyone should vote, increase the access, has caused people to put their guard down and to feel bad if they say, no, not everyone should vote. And here's what's happened. The reality of all these laws and policies and procedures that allow everyone to vote has opened the door to corruption and the potential to manipulate election outcomes. The result has been the forcible transformation of California from a constitutional republic is what we're supposed to be, to a socialist oligarchy. And we see that through the laws that are being passed, how many citizens living under those laws are passing them. For 10 years, EIPCA researched, observed, documented, and reported serious issues with California's election process. We provided those reports to every authority who could have fixed the problem, from the Department of Justice, the Department of Homeland Security, the Secretary of State, the registrars of voters, even DAs who we brought hard copy documented evidence of voter registration fraud, and were told, don't worry doing that kind of information observation anymore or documentation, because they would not take action because they couldn't prove intent. And just to show you how insidious this is, the documentation that we brought to them was people who were taking a hard copy voter registration application and creating a new one, almost identical, but they were slightly changing the name of the voter or the birth date. And on the documents that we brought in, they weren't signing the voter's name. They were signing their own name. So we knew exactly who did it. And on those voter registration applications was stamped the company that they worked for. So bringing those into the DA, we thought for sure they're going to open an investigation. And what we were told is that was so cleverly done that they would not be able to prove intent of the person who signed the document, because that person would say, I was told to do it by my boss. And who's my boss? Right here, stamped on the registration application. And they'd go to the company and say, what are you doing? You can't do that. And of course, the company would say, we didn't tell him to do that. So they said that would be too much money, too much effort, and don't bother doing that work again. That was in 2016. So EIP proved that Californians can and are being manipulated. We proved that the system is corrupt systemically. Every county, we found the same kinds of issues. Integrity is being removed from the election process through legislation, as I've been sharing with you. And by 2015, we had a civil rights hearing in which we proved that citizens of California had lost their voice in government. The civil rights commissioner who oversaw that hearing put together an extensive, well-documented report of the mounds of documents that we brought to that hearing, the 82 citizens who drove throughout the state to testify. It was a very strong report, and unfortunately that report was heavily redacted and buried. So again, nothing was done about what we had been documenting. The areas that can be manipulated, because of our years of documentation and identifying the patterns, we've identified the issues of concern in 2012, all the way back then, and we've seen them all the way through every election since. So bottom line, ballots that are in an envelope, bloated voter rolls, poor poll worker training, vulnerable populations, laws that remove integrity in the election process, and policies and procedures that open the door to fraud. In 2019 and 20, we added to that issue the Dominion type voting machines. So these are the areas that and how it looks very quickly. Provisional ballots, that was the first picture that we got in 2012. The number of provisional ballots that came in 2012 through the Pew Research Center, we learned 40% of all provisional ballots nationwide were cast in California. And that was our first smoking gun. We wondered why. Why would California have such a problem with in-person voting that people had to use a provisional ballot? Well, we continued to then monitor that particular issue. And by 2016, California had cast 60% of all provisional ballots nationwide. So keep that in the back of your mind as I go now to the next part of vote by mail. Again, it's a ballot that is being put into an envelope, which then requires the ballot to be processed. It's in the processing where we identified that at any part, any step of the processing, there is a possibility to make changes from having the outside of the ballot envelopes have the party affiliation indicated on it, which allows the sorting at that point to simply toss out ballots from the party you don't want in. The next is a major issue of the remaking of the ballots. When you vote by mail, it's required that they open the ballot, check out the ballot, make sure that it'll go through the scanning machine. At that point, that person can simply say, yep, needs to be changed. And they could make that decision based on how you voted. You're supposed to have a private ballot, but when you vote at home, you give up that privacy because you put it in an envelope and you accept that someone else is going to look at your ballot. Most people don't really understand that. So ballots that are submitted in an envelope are highly susceptible to manipulation. The next is voter rolls that are not being maintained. And I'll just say, because that's talked about nationally, when we filed our lawsuit, we had already documented that California had over 4 million questionable ballots on the statewide voter roll database. And that's why we filed a lawsuit. We retained Judicial Watch to sue to force California to clean up their voter rolls. The biggest concern we've seen throughout the state, and we know this is happening nationally, is the vulnerable populations that should be protected are actually manipulated. Seniors and any individual who's living in a situation where they need assistance can and are being manipulated. We know that college students are manipulated. They're dependent on good grades. In fact, 2012, Cal Poly Pomona had a 600% turnout because college students were told they could vote at any polling location. And we'd identified that in order to pass a ballot measure that would help the colleges, students were traveling from Riverside County to San Bernardino County to LA County, down the 57 to Orange County, and down further into San Diego County. They were told that it was okay because if they voted with a provisional ballot, the county would simply mail the provisional ballot back to their original county. And the reality is there's no time for that to actually happen. And of course, non-citizens who don't know our laws are easily manipulated, especially because of California's bad laws. Two of them, especially 2013, California passed a law allowing non-citizens to actually handle our ballots at the voting stations. Also, we know non-citizens are added to the voter rolls with or without their knowledge when they go to the DMV. Real concern is poll workers. They are not getting the training. We've heard this the whole 10 years we've been at this. People who work in the polls are stunned at how little they know about the laws. And so they are ill-equipped to recognize if the polling actions are being taken. They don't recognize when someone is voting for someone else. They make changes to their procedures right there in the polling location to try to make things run better. And they don't realize that they're actually violating law. So lack of poll worker training is what we brought forward because it is a violation of the Help America Vote Act. And then, of course, 2019, we began researching the Dominion machines before the rest of the country was really talking about it. And that's because we did an open records request in 8 counties. And one of our counties quickly said they couldn't give us anything because the information was protected. So I won't go much into that because we know the country's talking about it. But these are the categories that everyone should be looking at in every state in the union, because every one of these hotspots are openings to manipulating the outcome of an election. That was not supposed to show up. Sorry about that. All right. So the big question is, how did this happen? It's because we didn't know election officials would not necessarily keep their oath if we weren't overseeing it. We didn't know we had to keep the republic. What does it mean to keep the republic? We have a constitutional republic, and at the time of the Constitutional Convention, the conversation was not about, are you going to give us a monarchy or a republic or a democracy? The question was, have you given us a republic or a monarchy? And that's really important because a democracy is very different from a republic. Our lack of understanding of the basic keep the republic principles resulted in our becoming easily manipulated by those who envision a very different America. The United States was formed as a constitutional republic, not a democracy. Government by the majority, that's a democracy, becomes tyranny of the majority. And that's because in a democracy, 51% plus 1 can tell the other 49% to shut up and sit down. And how many of us are feeling now that we're being told to shut up and sit down? Thank God Americans don't have it in their blood to sit down. Well, some do, but we all don't on this call. We will not shut up, nor will we sit down or stand up. In a constitutional republic, a supreme power resides with the people and their elected representatives. Those representatives must govern according to existing constitutional law. A constitutional republic limits government's power over citizens, and it protects the minority from the majority. The cornerstone of republic is the ability of citizens to choose those who govern, and citizen oversight of our election process is the cornerstone of keeping the republic. On January 4th, we did file a lawsuit. EIPCA and 13 congressional candidates filed a lawsuit challenging the constitutionality of California laws, emergency regulations, and policies and procedures. The defendants are the Secretary of State, the Attorney General, the Governor, and 13 county registrars. You can find out more on our website if you go to eip-ca.com to learn about our work. We are in Arizona, Nevada, Arkansas. We have a national election integrity alliance that we meet with. But if you click on the California icon, you'll get to the lawsuit. So that's it for me. And I will hand this over to Josh to tell you more about this incredible lawsuit that's been filed.
Thanks, Linda. So as Linda mentioned, the work that EIPCA has done really over the course of many, many years has led to our ability to bring this lawsuit. EIPCA, among other things, trains thousands of citizen observers to observe the election process. And in November 2020, those citizen observers made more than 700 sworn affidavits showing irregularities in that process. Those are affidavits that should be admissible in court. And so there's a treasure trove of evidence for the irregularities that took place in November 2020 and that are likely to repeat in upcoming elections that don't exist in other states. And that's because of the work that EIPCA has done. So the lawsuit is being led by EIPCA and 13 congressional candidates who ran for U.S. Congress in November 2020. Each of those candidates lost by varying margins, some of whom lost by very slim margins. And they and EIPCA are now challenging the election process in California that led to the irregularities at that time, and that will lead to irregularities again if not remedied. Linda went through in pretty good detail the election practices and statutes and regulations the lawsuit is challenging. But I think the overall picture is a lack of chain of custody from the moment that these ballots go out, and we're sending ballots out into the wild basically to every active voter on the voter rolls, including people who are clearly ineligible to vote. And those go out in the mail, and at that moment, chain of custody is lost. And from that moment, there are a number of other points at which those ballots can be manipulated. So ballot harvesters can be sent out, and they can be paid by candidates or by groups or whomever to go out and collect thousands of ballots on behalf of the people who are paying them. And again, they don't have to have any relationship with the people from whom they're collecting the ballots. It's particularly an issue for vulnerable communities. As Linda mentioned, people in nursing homes, immigrant communities that don't speak English, etc. And then once those ballots come in, there are additional security issues with the remaking ballots, adjudicating ballots, not adequately verifying signatures, and then using voting machines that run on software that even the county registrars oftentimes don't have access to, and so they don't know precisely what's going on in their own ballot tabulators. So the goals of this lawsuit are really threefold. Number one, to get a court order declaring that current system is unconstitutional and can't be used for future elections. And to go along with that, what we need is an audit of November 2020, because as much evidence as EIPCA has managed to gather, there's still a lot that's out there that's in the hands of the registrars and the state that we don't have access to. And in order to show the full extent of the effects of these patterns and these practices that the state and county registrars have engaged in, we need to be able to show what all took place in November 2020. And then the third goal is the appointment of a special master to oversee that process. So the special master would have the power. This is a court-appointed neutral, essentially, somebody or some organization, group of people who have the know-how to understand election processes from a cybersecurity, cyber forensics point of view, from the point of view of the paper ballots and envelopes, and the entire chain of custody, to oversee the elections that are coming up and gather evidence of what's taking place in those elections, so that evidence too can be used by the court to fashion a remedy for all of these security issues that we see in the elections that have taken place in the past. Now, this is a very different lawsuit from a lot of the election lawsuits that have been brought previously. You're no doubt familiar with the slew of election lawsuits that were brought at the end of last year, the beginning of this year, that have been dismissed. Those lawsuits, by and large, targeted just the November 2020 election and just one candidate or one race, like the presidential race, and attempted to overturn those results. The courts have dismissed those cases by and large based on the idea that they're moot, meaning that the court can't do anything now because the purportedly elected people have already been seated. So those cases have gone away by and large. This case is forward-looking, meaning that it seeks to ensure integrity for future elections, to get a court ruling on the process that's taking place now in California and that's being expanded to other states, and for that to be ruled unconstitutional. Obviously on a national level, HR 1 is an attempt to make many of these practices that are already taking place in California national law. And we're bringing our suit in federal court. So any decisions from an appeals court or the Supreme Court would have precedent on HR 1 as well. And if a higher court were to find that any aspects of California's election practices are unconstitutional, for those same reasons, they'd be unconstitutional if they're implemented at the federal level. So it's really a landmark lawsuit and has the opportunity to be game changing here, I think, and that's essentially it. The lawsuit was filed on January 4th. We have a motion to dismiss hearing coming up. The other side's going to try to get the trial court to dismiss the case. If that happens, which it may, because again, a lot of these cases are a little bit of political hot potato. That just allows us to get to the circuit court, the Court of Appeals, where we actually have an opportunity to make some precedential law, and those courts tend to be less likely to avoid ruling on cases like this. So we're quite far along now in the case. It's survived quite a bit of attempt by the other side to get rid of it, and it's still here, and we're still fighting, and I think it's well set up to have a major impact both here in California and on the national stage. Now I will turn it over to Congressman Cannon to talk a little bit more about the election integrity efforts that are going on in the state.
Thank you, Josh and Linda. That was really very helpful, very straightforward. I got to point out that I'm not 90. So I only served in Congress for 12 years, not for 40. But let me talk a little bit from the perspective of how Congress works and why this lawsuit is so important. Right now, the president controls the executive branch. The House is dominated by Democrats, not so much as it has historically been, but the Democrats are voting in lockstep in ways that I've never seen before. And that's there are charts that show that this has gotten worse over time, and I think most Americans understand that. In the Senate, it's 50-50, which means the vice president casts the critical vote when all the Democrats vote one way and all the Republicans vote another way, and that's of course been fairly common in recent weeks. And in the Senate, there are two senators who understand that they come from states that are likely to be more red than they are blue. And so you have Joe Manchin from West Virginia, who is by far the most powerful man in Washington, D.C. today, because he's the key vote on virtually anything that happens. And then from Arizona, you have Kristen Sinema, who got elected and is very sensitive to the fact that Arizona is not particularly a blue state. And so the two of them have said, first of all, they're not going to vote to change the filibuster rules. And secondly, they've said they're not going to vote. They both said they're not going to vote for H.R. 1, which is the bill that implements nationally the laws that California has implemented that allow California to be such a blue state. That I think is an exaggeration. I grew up in Southern California, and Americans, wherever they are, have a tendency to like to be free, and that can be trained out of them to some degree. But I just don't believe California is as as blue as it has appeared historically to be. I think that if this House Bill 1 passes the Senate, it's already passed the House. If Sinema and Manchin cave, then the only hope for America for reasonable elections is going to be the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court can't hear it unless there's a case before it. And the case that Josh has just described is a case that deals with all the fundamental issues. It could be before the Supreme Court in time for the 2022 elections. And the Supreme Court could decide with great clarity what the rules for how we elect people are going to be. And if that happens, then America has the potential of what I think is likely to happen, which is that the House becomes very Republican, the Senate becomes quite Republican, and we have what the founding fathers hoped for, which is a bit of a stalemate in government, so that we stop these crazy things. I don't know if you all have seen, but today or yesterday, you had John Kerry, who's in charge of the Green New Deal, pointing out that pipelines are the best way to move oil. And the Secretary of Energy has just come out and said pipelines are the best way to move oil. And that's because we have a pipeline shut down because of technology and a hack attack in the Southeast. And that's causing up to 70% of gas stations to be without gas and a bit of a panic. So they have to recognize the value, the importance of pipelines. But at the same time, this administration has stopped the Keystone Pipeline, which is a big part of our energy security and the reason why energy is not going to go up in cost. But it would appear that with the Green New Deal and the other concepts of this administration, that we're going to have two incredibly cruel taxes, very regressive taxes. The first is on carbon, and that means be paying more at the pump for your gas. And the second is through inflation, which is the most cruel of all taxes that a government can impose. So we're sitting on the cusp of a very critical time frame. And if this lawsuit gets to the Supreme Court in time, which I think it has, Josh and I have talked a little bit about the timing. If that happens, then you're going to see, I think, the likelihood that the Supreme Court says, wait, we have rules, and those rules exist for a purpose. You can't have national legislation when the Constitution requires states to control their elections, and states have to abide by certain principles in the Constitution. So what we're talking about here today is the great hope for democracy, the great hope for constitutional government in America. And Josh is the leading voice on that. I've appreciate, Josh, your statements. And Linda, you laid it out very nicely. And that's all I really have to say. Thank you.
Let me step in here and thank you very much, Congressman, for sharing those important views and the wisdom from your experience. And I must say, you don't look 90. My correction on the error on the maybe you just gained enough wisdom that you makes people think you were there 40 years.
I would hope.
At this time, we've had some excellent information and some insightful observations. And I know that our audience will have many questions as we move into an approximate 20-25 minutes of Q&A. And I've seen some questions typed in the group chat, and we are asking those to please, type them in the group chat, and then we'll go through that list in a reasonable order. So we can maximize our time. And let me ask you, Jared, have you seen some of the questions? Can you share some with our speakers? And we'll let any one of our main three speakers sort of say, yeah, I want to answer this one, etc.
Sure. Yeah. You want me to go ahead and just read down the list of questions we have?
Well, as you might go from the top to the bottom, or the things need to be blended. And let me also say, at this time, I'm going to be sending out a poll with 3 simple questions about today's event, and as to whether you found the event so far useful and valuable, and how concerned you are about election integrity. So I will send that out myself right now, and feel free to answer that in the next 10 or 15 minutes, and then we'll summarize that.
All right. Well, I'll list the questions, and if any of the speakers would like to answer it, just let me know, or go ahead and jump in. First question we had was, why do we insist that best practices are used in nearly all other areas of government except for in elections?
Well, I can make a comment on that one. Elections have become incredibly complicated, and most citizens have no idea what those complications are, because most don't know what the laws or the procedures are. So we have dependent upon our foundational principles in the Constitution to live free. And so our nature is that everything's working right when elected officials take an oath to protect and defend from and without, and to do their job. We just assume that that's what they're going to do. So for the most part, Americans don't think about the election process, so we don't know if best practices are being implemented. I do find, though, that once citizens are educated about the fact that best practices are not being implemented, they all feel the same way, that action needs to be taken and we need to correct it. So I think it's a matter of education, from my view.
Great insight, Linda. Thank you. Jared, do you have the next upcoming question?
Yeah, we have a few other questions here. It's a couple variations of the same question. I'll read it. It says, I think there are valid concerns about California election laws. However, I'm concerned about overstating the case. If conservatives are convinced that elections are rigged against us, will not participate, and it will be a self-fulfilling prophecy. We saw that in the Georgia runoffs. How do we convince conservative voters to continue participating and voting while addressing the real concerns with California's election process?
Yeah, well, that is a real concern, and it's a concern across the board, not just with conservatives. But if people don't have confidence in the election process, as Linda alluded to, they can and will stop voting, and that's part of the case that we're making to the court here, is that transparency is paramount, and that we can't bury our heads in the sand and pretend that no problems exist when there are mountains of evidence showing these irregularities. At the same time, it's regardless of what concerns you have, it's extremely counterproductive to not vote. Regardless of whether or not you feel that your vote is being diluted or not counted, it's important that you participate in the process. Number one, because it very well may make a difference. It's not as though no votes are being counted. But number two, because it's important to document what's happening in the course of that process, and to document it accurately, and to show what's happening if there are certain votes or certain groups who are being particularly affected. So it's extremely counterproductive to sit it out, and I would encourage everybody who's eligible to exercise that right.
Let me just add to that. I think this is a very upbeat thing. If people understand that the reason California is so blue is because of voting fraud, and they realize that we can get a handle on that, this is a hopeful message that you should get out and vote, because your vote will count, because now with the fraud. So a lot of my friends from California are puzzled. How could California be so whacked out crazy? And the answer is they're probably not. It's probably the system that's the problem. So let's get out and vote in this next election, which will be the most important election ever. And we got some great candidates running, by the way.
Jared?
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, and then we had another question, and it looks like a few similar questions about holding elected officials, accountable for internal controls to ensure both roles are accurate. And how can we go about doing that, and why aren't they being held accountable to these controls and to the Constitution?
Let me speak to that, since I was there and I've watched a lot of people capitulate to Potomac fever. The fact is, the divergence in government is not so much liberal and conservative, words that I don't even understand anymore. But it is more a matter of people who believe they can engineer society, and other people who believe that individuals making decisions on their own will do better. And it's easy to get in a position where you begin to believe that you and your vote in Washington, D.C., or at a school board level, whatever level, that you're more competent to make decisions for other people. And that's the opposite of freedom. It's satanic, frankly. And so what you need to do is not have term limits and those kinds of restrictions. What we need is an active populace that will vote for the right kind of people. Now, the extremes that this administration is going to and has gone to already are lighting a fire under some people, not everyone. I mean, President Biden has a 56% approval rating. This is mind-boggling to me, when people ought to be thinking about what it costs to, for that woman who has children and has to work 3 jobs. The third job is to pay for the gas to get to the other 2. That's just criminal. And yet we've got a very high approval rating. That is going to change over the next couple of years. And I believe you're going to see a whole bunch of candidates coming out talking about America, what it means to be an American, what constitutional government and rule of law means, why equity is such a silly concept as opposed to equal justice under law. And so I think you're going to see an awakening of America. And that means, I'm sorry to say for some people, that they're going to get unelected. They're going to be removed from office and replaced by people that are committed. And those people will have a tendency to capitulate again. And at the same time, they're going to be aware. The only real hope that I have for the next 2 years is that Kristen Sinema, as I mentioned earlier, and Joe Manchin actually keep their commitment to their conservative constituents. So it is Americans who have the ultimate responsibility here, and we have to replace our elected officials. It's just that simple.
If I can add, the work that we've done in 10 years, we have been actually just experienced firsthand why our elected officials or our registrars of voters, where they're not motivated to make positive change. And this is the bottom line. When the election process can be manipulated, there's a certain confidence within people who are in positions of power that they're going to overcome it, because I can't believe that they don't know that what I just laid out for you all, that these abilities to manipulate the system, that they are going to be manipulated. So this is why this case is critical. And this is why observing the recount election also critical. The only way we, the people, are going to fix this is to take the 10 years of documented evidence. No other state has this. This is why California is so important. The 10 years of documented evidence through this court case and make sure it gets all the way to the Supreme Court. Because once elected officials know we can remove them, you will start to see them respond. And that's why we can't give up and not vote, because it's hard right now. It's like running a marathon. Maybe we're in the 18th mile. So if you want to get across the finish line, you got to keep running. So we say to California citizens, we need thousands to oversee that special election, and we need people to vote so that we can continue to test the system. We have an opportunity to overwhelm the system with enough voters who go to the polls and vote. But I recommend, if at all possible, do not put your ballot in an envelope. Go and vote in person.
Thank you so much for those answers. We had another question, with so much writing on litigation and the Supreme Court, how can we have confidence in the Supreme Court when they have shown, they will not make decisions on some of the controversial things that have been brought before them?
Well, look, the Supreme Court has a lot of political pressures on it, and it's as everybody's aware, it's been a very politicized court. But if we're looking at the election cases that the Supreme Court refused to hear, these were election cases that specifically had to do with the presidential election, November 2020, and the court didn't want to wade into that and overturn the reported results of that election. At least that's what it looks like, because they, other than a couple of dissents, they didn't explain their reasoning in denying to hear those cases. But they have been hearing other cases having to do with voting, including a case in Arizona regarding whether or not Arizona has the right to not allow ballot harvesting or ballot trafficking in its state, a case that EIP Arizona is involved with. So it's not as though the Supreme Court is not going to touch any of these. And just because there are some outcomes that seem poor or unfair, doesn't mean that the court is totally lost to bringing issues like this to it. My view is that actually, if these issues get to the Supreme Court, that the court is likely to take a very close look at this, actually review it, issue a decision, and probably issue a favorable decision. So, again, it's sort of like, it's just like with the voting processes here. It's not as though all is lost. There is more than a ray of hope, I would say. There's quite a bit, but it's important to keep pushing and not to give up, because that's really when progress stalls.
Great, thank you so much for that answer, Josh. That's really helpful on that. The next question that we had was regarding future elections, and specifically with the recall effort of Governor Newsom. How can we be sure that it's going to be fair?
And you want to tackle that, Linda?
Yeah, that is often a question, because we have become a society that sort of text message. We want it done in how many words or less? Quick. So, is it going to be fair and honest per se? Well, we think we're going to make a positive difference by making it more fair and honest, because we hope to train thousands who will go out and observe the actual process. So, those who are conscious of what they're doing or not conscientious, they're going to do the very best they can to do the right thing. And so for those who are tempted to not do the right thing, it's kind of like the kid with the hand in the cookie jar. They're not going to do it if mom walks into the kitchen. So we're going to see, at least with good observation, we're going to eliminate some of that simple stuff. The complicated stuff that is being named in our lawsuit, that's why we have a lawsuit. We are anticipating some of those same vulnerabilities still in play. We're still anticipating those who are willing to cheat an election to get what they want will still attempt to do that. So the very best we can do then is document additional evidence that what we're saying now in the lawsuit, we believe that these problems contributed to a unfair election or a questionable election in 2020, and we want the courts to look at it because it's looking forward. We're now looking forward to an election coming up, and we can say, look, we told you it was a problem, and here it happened again. So I think the very best thing Californians can do is observe the process and document for us, help us to get as much documentation as possible, and put your vote in. We are a republic, and we the people need to act like we're a republic in order to take it back.
Yeah. Well said, Linda. Yeah, we have to take ownership of our government, no doubt about it. It's our fault if things aren't going well. Jared, the next question.
The next question is, what's the best way to donate money specifically for the lawsuit that's being discussed?
We have two ways that people can donate. One is through our C3. That is an opportunity to have a tax deduction. And then again, through our election integrity action, our C4 that we've just launched. If you're concerned about cancel culture or whatever's going on and you'd like to support this, but be able to remain discreet, go through our C4. Both our 13 candidate plaintiffs have a website where you can go and donate electronically even, and that the funds go directly to litigation. If you donate on EIPCA, it goes to litigation and it helps us pay our bills and keep our doors open. If you'd like to contribute through the C4, please contact me at corpoffice@eip-ca.com. There are two ways that you can donate to the C4, and that is through a check or through a direct wire. And that's how we are able to keep protect your anonymity.
Thank you, Linda, very much. Jared, next.
And then we have another question regarding Maricopa County, saying, why weren't irregularities being discovered in Maricopa County's audit? Why weren't they audited, identified in the county's routine post-election audit? Are post-election audits deficient?
I don't know that Maricopa County had a typical before it was demanded. Maricopa County, by the way, let me just say this. Arizona does not allow citizens to oversee our election process like California does. Our Arizona team, Election Integrity Project Arizona, put together an incredibly good bill after a great amount of work and submitted it to the legislators and asked that citizens be allowed to observe our process and not have to be connected to a political party. And unfortunately, that bill was not taken up. So we're going to push to see it taken up again. Had they have done that, there's tremendous evidence that would have been brought to the attention immediately after the elections, including the manipulation of senior facilities in Arizona. Our executive council manager took on a job with an organization that claimed to be assisting seniors and people who are dependent and living in care living facilities to assist them in registering to vote and voting. So he sort of infiltrated that by taking a job with them. And what he documented is that the game plan was to register every single person in a home, regardless of whether they were qualified. He was given the job to go to two facilities that were labeled dementia patients. And he said, I can't go there. They have dementia. They don't know what they're going to vote for. Their answer to him is, unless the families filled out the paperwork to say, no, they're not capable, then they're open. They're wide open. And so, of course, he did not go and register them, but he documented exactly how that organization worked. And that organization is paid by tax dollars. We attempted to provide that documentation to those who would have audited. But again, we don't have the right to observe as citizens. So every state in the union needs to implement a citizen organization to observe election process, and that would have, I think, made a difference. But right now they're moving forward, and I think that's a good thing. They realized pretty quickly there was a problem.
Excellent. Jared, we have time for maybe 2 or 3 more questions.
Okay. Related to Arizona as well, someone asked if Arizona finds fraud, then shouldn't all states that have Dominion systems be audited?
I don't know, Josh.
I mean, I guess it would depend what sort of fraud Arizona finds, and whether it has to do with the systems or with something else. And I'd note that Dominion's not the only voting machine system that's at use. There's ES&S, there's Smartmatic. There are a number of voting machine providers that are used across the country. And some counties, even Los Angeles County, purports to have a proprietary system, although it looks like it was probably set up by one of the voting machine providers, but it doesn't use all of their equipment or something. So there are a lot of issues that we've seen with the contracts that the registrars of voters have with these voting machines companies. A lot of those contracts, at least as the registrars read them, prevent them from taking a look under the hood at the machines and what the software is doing, and also allowing audits to those machines. And so there are still a lot of questions about what's going on in the internals there, and the registrars themselves don't know. So it would seem reasonable that if systems are found to have caused irregularities or what have you, changed votes or something like that, and I don't know what the audit will find, whether it'll find that or not, that might be an issue across any machines that are using that system, and that they ought to be audited across the board.
But thank you, Josh and Linda, for answering that question. The same person also asked, in terms of having the election process repealed, how would you go about that? Would that be placing it on a ballot through petition process? What would that look like?
Well, the lawsuit itself seeks a court order that declares aspects of the election process unconstitutional. So that's one route, is to get a court order that says, look, you cannot do this, and this, and potentially also that you have to implement these other practices instead. That's one way. I suppose another way would be legislation. So there are probably a number of ways to go after the election process, but you have to, if you're going to have an election law, you have to have the political will for it. And what we've been seeing is are laws that really go in the opposite direction, both nationally in other states and here in California. So our feeling is that at this point in this state, it's really the lawsuit that is the way forward.
Great, thank you, Josh. And as a final question, and I think you answered it for the most part, but is what's the best way to make a difference for folks who are watching this meeting? Kind of action items.
I think number one, get involved. Right now, we are beginning to take applications for those who'd like to be a coordination team leader. We on our website, you can go to eip-ca.com, and we have a link there for folks who want to sign up. So when they click that link, I'd like to volunteer. There'll be 2 options. I'd like to be a coordination team member, or I just want to observe in the fall when that happens. And so we're asking people to sign up now. We think there's going to be a tremendous support for that, because so many organizations, large organizations in the state, have contacted us saying they want their members to be involved. And we need to process all those applications. Just so you know, everyone, the reason our documentation is so valid is we don't just say, hey, everyone, just go to the polls and watch. When a citizen observes with EIPCA, they start off with an application process. We want to know that they're very real people. We want to know that they're signing on the dotted line saying, I will comply with state and federal law and with the IPCA's policies and procedures when you go out to observe the polls. We have a confidentiality agreement that says when you observe, you're going to be turning in those reports to EIPCA so we can take action on them. So people who want to just go out and watch can go do that. But people who really want to get involved and help address this issue, we're asking you to consider observing with the IPCA. That's probably the number one thing you can do. Second, number one thing, really press people to vote in person. I can't push enough how dangerous it is to put your ballot in an envelope. For 10 years, we observed all manner of manipulation of your ballot once it goes in the envelope. You have lost your right of privacy at that point. Please let people know that. Now, some counties are saying, too bad, so sad, we're not doing vote in person. I would begin now pressing your registrar to say, we want to have the possibility of choice. We want to be able to choose to vote in person. And some counties already are pushing that. San Francisco County has made a big difference pushing for that. So you have time to make changes in your own county. So county by county is where you can make a big difference starting now, then in the fall. Be prepared to volunteer with us.
That's great, Linda. Thank you so very, very, very much. And we've had some excellent questions, excellent feedback. And I know not everyone's had a chance for all the questions to be answered. What I'm doing right now is I'm posting onto the group chat my direct email, and which is bruce.lee.sta@gmail.com. STA standing for SacTax. If you have additional questions, or we're going to try to get those answered for you. Now, at the same point, let me share quickly the poll that came out, and the results were. I'll let you read the results yourself. And Jared, do you want to post that poll, or shall I?
Let's see. If you post it, I think it would be easier.
I'll do that right now.
Okay.
And so the polling results, was this a useful event? 77% found it very useful. Are you concerned about election integrity in the USA? 95% definitely are very, very concerned. And should we hold additional events like this by SacTax? Yes, definitely an 86%. So those are very positive feedbacks, and we appreciate that. And I want to thank all the speakers in this process. There are a couple other things I do want to send you here in this last few moments. If you want to be part of this process of restoring integrity in our government, let me encourage you to stay in contact with us so that we can help you get involved. But I also want to alert you to 2 upcoming events that will be happening soon. And being part of the solution to maximize citizen oversight and citizen ownership over our government and keeping our government accountable, we do have our SacTax annual dinner set for June 30th, 2021. And we're planning to host candidates who will be competing for Governor Newsom's site. That's our intent. The event will be full. And so we have an RSVP save the date link that's going out in the chat right now. And more information will be emailed to you as we get that further refined. But that's sort of first come, first serve, save a place, and then we'll get more information to you. The other item I wanted to share is this, and let me simply, just like in joining in with our election integrity folks, let me invite you to join forces with SacTax by considering being a member and the first in the know. Frankly, it's a modest investment with a great return. Membership can be as low as $20. So we're sending a link now where you can go to learn more about SacTax, what we've been doing, and the various membership options. We're right on schedule, And I totally want to thank all the participants, all the panel members, and for those that work very hard behind the scenes, especially Jack Frost, our SacTax Executive Director. And I know Sue Frost, County Supervisor of Sacramento, is on the line here also. And I want to recognize two of our sponsors, the Messenger Publishing Group, an independent newspaper group, sponsors SacTax, and they're dedicated to correct and timely information to our public, and Dauntless Communications for their effective website and social media work. And we've got a couple moments left here. So let me just ask Linda, or Josh, or Congressman, any last comments that you would like to make?
Thank you for hosting.
Oh, you're very welcome, Chris. Absolutely. I look forward to working with you.
Well, I'd like to say
thanks very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, and thank you to the citizens of California. Without their effort, we would not be here. So it's just as much a success to all of you as it is to EIPCA. I appreciate it.
And Josh, we interrupted you. I apologize.
Oh no, I was just thanking you for hosting and having us on. I thought it was fantastic. So thanks very much.
Well, hopefully we'll be able to do more of this, and that would be a delight. I did see one question from Supervisor Frost that came across, and this, but she'd asked a question about what's the difference between a forensic audit and a regular audit, forensic versus audit. Any input there?
Well, I guess audit is kind of a general term, right? So a forensic audit would be an audit that at least to my mind, goes back through the logs and the records and whatnot from a prior election, and tries to determine what took place. That's probably the intent, at least with respect to the computerized portion of the audit in Maricopa County, and it's what it would be part of the audit that we're asking the court to order here as well.
All right, that helps me. I appreciate that very much, Joshua. Well, in final comment, let me say I think we're talking to a group of individuals who are part of the solution, not part of the problem. And their dedication to that is going to make all the difference in the months and the years ahead. So I echo Linda's encouragement to be involved in the process, vote. Let's take responsibility and ownership over our government. Let's not let it slip through our fingers. As I've told many people, and I teach a great deal, there's no reason in the world that the United States has to remain a wonderful beacon on the hill. And believe me, as I work all around the world, literally, people are constantly, all through Africa, Asia, etc., they're contacting me saying, what's going on? You are our hope. And we are in dire need if we don't at least have a flame of hope before us. And that motivates me. There's no reason in the world the United States has to remain a great global influence and power. We can slip into a second-rate nationhood very easily if we allow that. And that's something we simply cannot allow. That's an obligation. As my good friend Paul Gann told me years ago, he said he was advised, it's a privilege to be born free. It is a duty to live free. And it is a responsibility to die free, because that's how our children will have the privilege of being born free. Thank you very much for your kindness, and go have a wonderful afternoon. We'll be working together, and we'll be following up with you. Okay. God bless. Thank you now. Bye-bye.
Thank you all.
Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.